You know that specific smell of cheap latex and desperation? That's what hit me the moment the elevator doors slid open on the 44th floor. It was a Tuesday, a day usually reserved for code reviews and drinking enough black coffee to kill a draft horse. But today, the open plan office looked like a gender reveal party for a demon. Purple and gold balloons were bobbing against the air vents, tied to the ergonomic chairs with curling ribbon that probably cost more than the intern's hourly wage. I stood there, clutching my travel mug, a beat-up stainless steel thing that had survived 3 mergers and a hostile takeover, and just watched. My team, a group of brilliant, sleep-deprived engineers who could code a sentient AI out of a toaster and some copper wire, looked like hostages in a bank robbery where the robbers were forcing them to do the Macarena. Standing on a makeshift stage made of pallets and fake turf was Tiffany. Tiffany, the CEO's daughter-in-law. She was 32, had an MBA from a university that advertises during daytime court TV shows, and wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes because the buttocks had set up a perimeter defense. If you enjoy stories about corporate train wrecks and methodical revenge, go ahead and hit subscribe and give this a like, because what I'm about to tell you is the definition of damming around and finding out, and it really helps the team keep these confessions coming. Linda, Tiffany squealed, her voice hitting a frequency that I'm pretty sure is illegal in the European Union. She waved a perfectly manicured hand at me. You're just in time for the pivot. I walked over, my heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. It was a rhythmic sound. Click-clack, click-clack, the sound of a clock counting down. Oh, they didn't know it yet. The pivot, Tiffany, we're 3 weeks away from the Phase 1 launch. The infrastructure is 90% integrated. You can't pivot a battleship in a bathtub, she laughed. It was a tinkling, condescending sound like ice cubes hitting the bottom of an empty glass. Oh, Linda, you're so analog. We're not building a battleship anymore. We're building a movement. She gestured to the screen behind her. My architectural diagrams, 3 years of my life, thousands of hours of structural logic, the proprietary backbone that was currently holding up the company's entire valuation, were gone. In their place was a slide that just said Synergy 2.0 in a font that looked like it was written in crayon. I've been appointed transformation director, Tiffany announced, beaming at the room. The applause was scattered, terrified, and my first act is to democratize the leadership. Linda, you've done a sturdy job, really. But we need fresh eyes. We need digital natives. She pointed to a kid standing next to the ficus plant. Braden. Braden was 23. Braden wore loafers without socks and once asked me if SQL was the sequel to a movie he hadn't seen. Braden will be taking over as lead architect for the final rollout, Tiffany said. The silence that followed was heavy. It had mass. My lead engineer, Marcus, looked at me, his eyes wide, silently begging me to scream, to throw a chair, to do something. But I didn't scream. I'm a systems architect. I don't deal in chaos. I deal in logic gates. And the logic here was flawed, but the contract was absolute. Braden, I said, my voice dead calm. Do you know what the load balancer latency threshold is for the primary cluster? Braden blinked. Oh, we're going to move everything to the cloud, right? So 0? Right, I said, 0. I looked at Tiffany. She was glowing with the triumph of the incompetent. She thought she was clearing out the old guard. She thought she was winning. She had no idea she was pulling the pin on a grenade and tucking it into her designer handbag. So, Tiffany said, clasping her hands, I know this is a transition, Linda. We'll keep you on for 2 weeks to transfer knowledge. You can sit in the overflow cubicle near the bathrooms. It'll be quieter for you to write up the documentation for Braden. The disrespect was breathtaking. It was almost art. I set my travel mug down on the nearest desk. I reached into my purse. I didn't pull out a weapon, though in a just world I might have. I pulled out my badge. It was a heavy, magnetic key card that gave me access to the server rooms, the executive suites, and the hidden freight elevator. No need, I said. Tiffany tilted her head, like a golden retriever confused by a magic trick. Excuse me? I don't need 2 weeks, I said. I slid the badge across the table. It spun and stopped right at the edge, teetering. I resign, effective immediately. You can't just quit, Tiffany scoffed. We have a board meeting at 5 p.m. The investors are coming to see the demo. My father-in-law specifically said you needed to be there to answer the technical questions. Braden is the lead architect now, I said, smoothing down my blazer. He's a digital native. I'm sure he can explain the synergy. Linda stopped being dramatic, she snapped, her smile faltering for a microsecond. You're staying, that's an order. I looked at her. I looked at the balloons. I looked at the fear in my team's eyes. I'm not an employee anymore, Tiffany. I'm a civilian, and civilians don't take orders from transformation directors. I turned around. I could feel their eyes on my back. It felt like heat. Oh, I paused at the glass doors. Please tell your father-in-law that the 5 p.m. board meeting will be interesting. What does that mean? She demanded. I didn't answer. I just walked out. I didn't storm. I didn't slam the door. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a woman who knows exactly what time the bomb is set to go off and knows she has exactly enough time to get to a safe distance and pour a glass of wine. As I stepped into the elevator, I checked my watch. 9:15 a.m. The Atlas protocol, my life's work, had a heartbeat, and I had just stopped the pacemaker. Now, we just had to wait for the patient to realize they were dead. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in the suburbs of Northern Virginia at 11 o'clock a.m. on a Tuesday. It's the silence of leaf blowers paused for lunch and Amazon delivery trucks idling at stop signs. It was a stark, beautiful contrast to the digital inferno I knew was currently raging 20 miles away in Tyson's Corner. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of my engine and the settling of my nervous system. When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't go inside immediately. I stood by my hydrangea bushes. They were wilting slightly. I grabbed the hose. The cool water misting over the leaves felt like a baptism. I was washing away 3 years of corporate jargon, 3 years of circling back, and 3 years of fixing mistakes made by men who made triple my salary. My phone, which I had left on the passenger seat of my car, was lighting up like a disco floor. I didn't need to look at it to know what was happening. I could see the sequence of events in my mind like a compiled script. First, the gossip mill would churn. The engineers, Marcus, Sarah, David, be in a panic huddle in the break room. They knew. They were the only ones who actually understood the architecture. They knew that the Atlas system wasn't just a pile of code. It was a living ecosystem that required a specific biometric key to authorize changes. My key. By 10:30 a.m., Braden would have tried to log into the master admin console to change the color scheme for his Synergy presentation. He would have been met with a grayed-out screen. He wouldn't panic yet. He's young. He assumes every problem can be solved by refreshing the browser or asking ChatGPT. By 11 o'clock a.m., Tiffany would be getting annoyed. She'd be pacing around her office, demanding to know why the dashboard isn't popping. She'd tell Braden to just call Linda, and that's when the terror would start to creep in. I walked into my kitchen and made a sandwich. Turkey, Swiss, extra heavy on the mustard. I sat at my granite island and finally looked at my phone. 47 missed calls, 12 voicemails, a wall of text messages that looked like the frantic scribblings of a person buried alive. From Marcus, lead engineer, Linda, please pick up. Braden is trying to chmod the root directory. I can't stop him. He has admin privileges but no architectural clearance. It's going to trigger the lockout. From Tiffany, Linda, this is unprofessional. Pick up your phone. Need the password for the demo environment. Now. From Tiffany, 10 minutes later, I'm writing you up for insubordination. I chuckled. The sandwich tasted incredible. Writing up a non-employee for insubordination was exactly the kind of logic I expected from her. I opened my laptop, my personal MacBook, not the company-issued brick I'd left on the desk, and logged into my private email server. I checked the sent folder. There it was. The resignation email. But it wasn't sent to HR. It wasn't sent to Tiffany. It was sent to a secure, encrypted escrow service that timestamped it and forwarded it to the board of directors' legal counsel, the external auditors, and the CEO's executive assistant. Timestamp, 6:59 a.m., 2 hours before Tiffany's little coronation ceremony, 2 hours before she fired me / demoted me / reassigned me. Why did this matter? Because in the state of Virginia, and specifically within the ironclad clauses of the contract I wrote, yes, I wrote the technical scope of work, not legal, the timing of departure determined the custody of the intellectual property. If I had quit after she reassigned the project, it could be argued I was abandoning my post. But I had resigned before. I had resigned while I was still the sole authorized architect. I took a bite of a pickle. A jarring, sour crunch. I imagined HR frantically searching their inboxes. We don't have a resignation letter, the HR director would be saying, wiping sweat from her upper lip. Technically, she just walked out. Is that job abandonment? They were focusing on the wrong things. They were worried about employment law. They should have been worrying about copyright law. The phone rang again. It was the main office line. I let it ring. Then a text from Braden. From Braden, hey Linda, hope good. Quick Q, what's the login for the deep storage node? It's asking for 64 char key. Lol, thanks, lol, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I didn't reply, I wasn't being petty. Well, maybe 10% petty, but 90% of this was strategic. Any response from me could be construed as consulting work. If I helped them, even once, even with a single password, I would re-establish the employment link. I would validate their mess. Silence was my shield. Silence was my sword. I washed my plate. I dried it. I put it away. It was 1 o'clock p.m., 4 hours until the board meeting. 4 hours until the CEO, Richard, landed from his golf trip in Scotland. 4 hours until the $200 million question was asked, and the answer was a 404 error. I went to the living room and opened a book. A murder mystery. It felt appropriate. Except in my version, the body was a server farm, and the weapon was a clause on page 143. Back at the glass tower, the air conditioning was set to 68 degrees, but Gavin, the chief technology officer, was sweating through his bespoke Italian suit. Gavin was a man who had failed upward with the aerodynamic efficiency of a helium balloon. He knew buzzwords. He knew how to order expensive scotch. He did not, however, know how to build a distributed cloud architecture. I wasn't there, but I know exactly what was happening. I had worked with these people for 3 years. I knew their panic responses like I knew my own social security number. Gavin would be standing behind Braden's chair. Braden's chill vibes would have evaporated about an hour ago. Just bypass the authentication, Gavin would be barking, staring at a screen filled with cascading red text. We have the investor keys. Use the investor keys. I tried. Braden's voice would be cracking. It says invalid architectural sign-off. It says the system is in orphan mode. Orphan mode, Tiffany would snap, pacing the room. She'd have her phone in one hand, probably texting her husband, the CEO's son, to complain that I was being difficult. What the hell is orphan mode? Is that a bug? It's not a bug, Marcus, my lead engineer would finally say. Marcus was a good man, but he had a mortgage and twins in college. He didn't have the luxury of burning bridges. He was sitting in the corner, his head in his hands. It's a feature. Linda built it in year one. It prevents unauthorized takeovers. If the primary architect account goes inactive without a formal handover protocol, the system assumes a hostility event. A hostility event? Tiffany laughed, but it was a dry, jagged sound. I didn't attack the server. I just promoted a new lead. It's a staffing change, not a cyber attack. The system doesn't know the difference. Marcus would say quietly. To the kernel, a reassignment without the architect's private key looks exactly like a hacker trying to hijack the core. Well, override it, Tiffany screamed. You're the CTO, Gavin, override her. This is the part I relish most. The moment where titles meet reality. Gavin had the title. He had the salary. He had the corner office. But in the world of systems architecture, authority isn't granted by HR. It's granted by encryption. I can't, Gavin would admit, his voice small. She never transferred root access. We thought we assumed because she was quiet that she was just maintaining the legacy code. She locked us out. Tiffany's eyes went wide. She sabotaged the company? No, Marcus would correct her, and I love him for this, even if I never hear him say it. She didn't sabotage anything. The system is protecting itself. It's doing exactly what she programmed it to do. It's waiting for the architect. Call her again, Tiffany shrieked. I did, Gavin said, straight to voicemail. Send a courier to her house. She lives in a gated community, Marcus lied. I don't, but Marcus knows I hate unannounced visitors. At 2:30 p.m., the first cracks in the facade appeared outside the IT department. The marketing team couldn't update the website. The sales team couldn't access the CRM. The internal chat servers started to lag. Atlas Protocol wasn't just the new project. It was the spine, and I had removed the vertebrae. Tiffany stormed out of the server room. I'm calling my father-in-law. Richard will fix this. He'll sue her into the ground. She'll be living in a cardboard box by Friday. She dialed Richard. Richard, the CEO, who was currently at 30,000 feet, flying back on the corporate jet for the big meeting. I imagine the conversation was short. Richard, Linda has locked the system. She's holding us hostage. And Richard, who despite his nepotism actually understood the bottom line, would ask one question. Did you fire her? I repurposed her role. To streamline, did you fire her? She walked out. She quit. When this morning, right before the meeting, Richard would go silent. He knew I didn't do drama. If I walked out, the building was already on fire. Fix it, Richard would say, his voice cold. If the screens are blank when the investors walk in at 5 o'clock, Tiffany, being family, won't save you. Back in the server room, Braden was staring at the screen. The red text had changed. It was no longer scrolling. It was a single, static prompt. System lockdown imminent. Enter architect credentials or system will revert to base state in 120 minutes. What's base state? Braden whispered. Marcus looked up, his face pale. Factory settings. Empty. Blank slate. It deletes the data? No, Marcus said. It encrypts it and throws away the key. The clock on the wall ticked. 2:45 p.m. I turned the page of my book. The detective had just found a clue, a missing button. How trivial. The legal department was on the 12th floor. It smelled like mahogany and fear. At 4 p.m., 1 hour before the meeting, the head of legal, a shark named Sterling who wore suspenders unironically, screaming at 3 junior associates. Find the breach of contract. Sterling roared. She's an at-will employee. She has a fiduciary duty. If she maliciously encumbered company assets, we can have the sheriff drag her in here in handcuffs. They were tearing through my personnel file. They were reading my NDAs. They were looking for the standard boilerplate text that says everything you make belongs to us. But they were looking at the employment contract. They weren't looking at the Project Atlas IP agreement. See, 3 years ago, when the company was bleeding cash and their old system crashed for 3 days straight, they begged me to fix it. I was a consultant then. I wasn't desperate, they were, so I wrote the terms. When they hired me full-time later, they were so relieved to have the system stable, they just attached my original consultancy IP agreement to my employment contract as an addendum. They didn't read it. They just signed it, found it, a junior lawyer shouted. He was holding a document, trembling. Addendum B, the Atlas Development Framework. Read it, Sterling snapped. Clause 11.7, subsection C, the junior lawyer read, his voice wavering. In the event of project reassignment, demotion, or termination of the primary architect without a 60-day transitional period and written architectural sign-off. Get to the point. All external synchronization systems will automatically execute a protective freeze protocol. The room went silent. Protective freeze? Sterling whispered. What does that mean? It gets worse, the junior lawyer said. Subsection D. This protocol is designed to prevent intellectual property theft by unauthorized third parties. The system will revert to independent audit mode until the primary architect provides biometric unlocking. She licensed it to us, Sterling realized, sinking into his leather chair. She didn't sell it. She built it as a licensed tool, and the license is conditional on her supervision. Wait, Tiffany said. She had barged into the legal office, her mascara slightly smudged, so we just hire her back, offer her a bonus, double her salary, get her on the phone and tell her she can have the corner office. Sterling looked at Tiffany with pure loathing. It's not about the money, you idiot. Look at the timestamp on the lockout. They looked at the screen. The system had locked down at 9 a.m. She triggered this the second you announced the intern, Sterling said. She didn't do it from a keyboard. It was an automated dead man switch. If her badge didn't scan at the server room door by 12 p.m., the system assumed she was gone. So just hack it, Tiffany screamed. We can't, Sterling said. It's encrypted with a 256-bit key that rotates every minute. And legally, if we try to break the encryption, we are violating the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. She could sue us for triple damages. We're talking federal court. We're talking the SEC investigating why we're using unlicensed software to run our financials. 4:45 p.m. In the boardroom on the 50th floor, the waiters were pouring sparkling water. The expensive catered sandwiches were arranged on silver platters. The screens at the front of the room were gigantic, high-definition monsters. Currently, they were displaying a pulsating red logo, not the company logo, a lock icon, and underneath, in small, polite text, Contact Administrator. License suspended. Braden was in the boardroom, trying to connect his laptop to the HDMI, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if he ignored the server and just showed a PowerPoint, nobody would notice the live system was dead. It's just a glitch, Braden was muttering to the empty chairs. I'll just explain the vision. The elevator dinged. The investors were here. The sharks from the venture capital firm. The ones who looked at balance sheets like they were restaurant menus. They walked in, suits sharp, eyes cold. Where's Richard? The lead investor, a man named Mr. Henderson, asked. He's landing, Tiffany said, stepping forward, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. Welcome, I'm Tiffany, the new transformation director. We have such an exciting pivot to show you today. Mr. Henderson looked at the red screen. He looked at Tiffany. He looked at Braden, who was visibly vibrating. Why does the screen say license suspended? Henderson asked. Oh, that, Tiffany laughed. Technical hiccup. Software update. You know how technology is? I do know how technology is, Henderson said dryly. And I know that usually means you didn't pay the bill. We paid. Tiffany said, we own it. Actually, a voice came from the doorway. It wasn't me. It was Sterling, the lawyer. He looked defeated. We need to reschedule, Sterling said. We have a compliance issue regarding the architecture. Where is Linda? Henderson asked. He knew my name. I had briefed him 3 months ago. He liked me because I didn't use buzzwords. Linda is no longer with the organization, Tiffany said quickly. Henderson's eyes narrowed. He looked at the locked screen. He connected the dots instantly. You fired the architect, Henderson said, and she took the keys. She can't do that, Tiffany insisted. If she's smart, Henderson said, sitting down and crossing his legs, she already did. And if she's the one who built this, I'm betting she's smart. He looked at his watch. I'll wait for Richard. This should be entertaining. The doors to the boardroom flew open with enough force to rattle the windows. Richard, the CEO, strode in. He was wearing a windbreaker from St. Andrews and a look that could peel paint off a wall. He had clearly run from the tarmac to the car to the elevator. What? Richard hissed. Is happening? The room was silent. The investors were watching with the detached amusement of Romans at the Colosseum. Tiffany was standing near the whiteboard, looking small. Braden was practically merging with the drywall. Richard, Tiffany started, her voice shrill. It's sabotage. Linda planted a virus. She locked us out right before the demo to humiliate us. Richard didn't look at her. He looked at the red screen. License suspended. He turned to Sterling. Is it true? Did she sabotage us? Sterling cleared his throat. He held up a file folder. Technically, sir, no. The system reverted to its default legal state. Linda's personal consultancy owns the root architecture. We had a license to use it as long as she was the supervising officer. When her employment terminated without a transition agreement, the license expired. Instantly, but she quit. Tiffany yelled. She walked out on us. Actually, Sterling said, opening the folder. My team just found this. It was delivered to my inbox via secured escrow at 6:59 a.m. this morning. It placed a single piece of paper on the mahogany table. Her resignation letter, Sterling said, dated and timestamped 2 hours before you announced the reorganization. Richard picked up the paper. His hands were shaking slightly. She didn't walk out in a huff, Richard whispered, reading the text. She resigned because she knew you were going to replace her. I didn't tell her, Tiffany protested. It was a surprise. Linda doesn't like surprises, Richard said. Linda hears everything. He looked at the timestamp. Then he looked at his daughter-in-law. You tried to big league her, Richard said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You tried to take a 3-year project, a project worth $200 million to this firm and hand it to? He gestured vaguely at Braden, to an intern who isn't wearing socks. I was disrupting the paradigm. Tiffany cried. You disrupted our liquidity, Richard roared. He slammed his hand on the table. The water glasses jumped. Mr. Henderson, the investor, cleared his throat. Richard, am I to understand that the proprietary tech we are supposed to be investing in is not actually owned by this company? Richard turned to the investors. The color drained from his face. It's a complex IP structure. We can resolve it. We just need to get Linda back to the table. And where is she? Henderson asked. She's unavailable, Richard said. She's at home. Tiffany sneered, probably laughing at us. No, Henderson said, looking at his phone. He held it up. She's not at home. On Henderson's phone screen was a LinkedIn notification, a press release. Apex Systems welcomes new chief systems strategist. There was a photo. It was me. A professional headshot I had taken 2 years ago. I looked calm, competent. Apex, Richard choked out. Our competitor? Read the subheadline, Henderson said. Richard leaned in. Apex Systems secures exclusive licensing rights to the next-generation Titan infrastructure, formerly known as Atlas, architected by Linda R. Connors. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan, still displaying the red lock icon. She sold it, Sterling whispered. She resigned. The license reverted to her, and she sold it to Apex. In what, 6 hours? She didn't sell it in 6 hours, Richard said, collapsing into a chair. She's been planning this. She knew Tiffany was coming for her. She had the deal ready. He looked at Tiffany. The look wasn't anger anymore, it was disgust. You didn't just lose us the project, Richard said. You handed our entire infrastructure to our biggest rival. You armed the enemy. Tiffany started to cry. But family? Get out, Richard said. Dad, get out. Tiffany ran out of the room. Braden followed her, clutching his laptop like a life raft. Richard looked at the investors. Gentlemen, I assume the check is not coming today. Henderson stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Richard, the check isn't coming at all. We invest in stability. And frankly, we're going to call Apex. It sounds like they have a hell of a new system coming online. They walked out. Richard was left alone in the boardroom with Sterling and the red screen. License suspended. And 20 miles away, I turned the page of my book. The detective had solved the murder. It was the butler, but he made it look like an accident. The next morning, the office was a ghost town. The balloons were gone. The Synergy banner was in the trash. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it. My phone was finally silent. I had blocked every number associated with the company except for one, Richard's personal cell. I knew he would call. He had to. At 10 o'clock a.m., my phone buzzed. Richard, CEO. I let it ring 3 times, then I picked up. Hello, Richard, Linda. His voice sounded like he had aged 10 years in 12 hours. We need to talk. I'm afraid I'm under a strict NDA with my new employer, I said pleasantly. I can't discuss proprietary technology. Proprietary? He let out a strangled laugh. Linda, you gutted us. The servers are bricks. The sales team is using Excel spreadsheets on their personal laptops. We're bleeding out. That sounds like a transformation, I said. Isn't that what Tiffany wanted? Tiffany is gone, Richard said. I fired her this morning. Braden too. Gavin is on probation. It's a bloodbath, Linda. Are you happy? Happiness isn't a metric I track, Richard. I track efficiency. And Tiffany was inefficient. Linda, please, come back. We'll match Apex's offer. We'll double it. We'll give you equity. Just unlock the system. I can't, I said. And this is the part you need to understand, Richard. I didn't lock it to be mean. I locked it because I legally had to. Once I resigned, I was no longer an authorized agent of the company. If I had left the system open, I would have been liable for any data breaches. I protected you by locking it. Bullshit, Richard snapped. You protected yourself. You took the IP. Read the contract, Richard. Clause 11.7. The Atlas framework was licensed non-exclusively to the company, contingent on my employment. It's the same clause I used when I worked as an outside consultant. Your legal team never asked me to remove it when I went full-time. They were too busy checking my background for felonies. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the sound of a company dying. Apex, Richard said. How long have you been talking to them? Since the day Tiffany asked me to print out my code so she could read it on the plane, I said. That was 3 months ago. I knew then, someone who asks to print code isn't trying to understand it. They're trying to weigh it. They're looking for a reason to replace the expensive architect with a cheap mechanic, so you set the trap. I built a safety net, Richard. You're the one who pushed me off the ledge. You can't be mad that I didn't hit the ground. We're going to sue, Richard said, but there was no fire in it. We'll claim corporate espionage. Bad faith. Go ahead, I said. My resignation is time-stamped. My IP ownership is registered. And Apex has a legal team that makes Sterling look like a traffic court defender. Do you really want to spend the next 5 years in discovery, explaining to your shareholders why you let your daughter-in-law play CEO with the company's crown jewels? Richard sighed. It was a heavy, defeated sound. What do you want, Linda? I don't want anything, I said. I already have what I want. A job where the CTO knows what a load balancer is. A salary that reflects my value. And a boss who doesn't hire family members to fix things that aren't broken. You're cold, Richard said. I'm an architect, I replied. Structures don't care about feelings, they care about physics. If you remove the load-bearing wall, the roof collapses. I was the wall, Richard. You grabbed the sledgehammer. I hung up. I poured myself another cup of coffee. It was good coffee, not the sludge from the office break room. I had one more loose end to tie up. I opened my laptop. I logged into the Atlas remote admin panel one last time, not to unlock it, oh no, but to send a message. I typed a single command. Display message, system migrated. Good luck with the Excel sheets. I hit enter, and then I deleted my admin key permanently. The bridge wasn't just burned. I had nuked the river. The fallout was swift, brutal, and public. In the tech world, secrets don't stay secret for long, especially when they involve a $200 million deal evaporating into thin air. By Wednesday afternoon, the industry blogs picked it up. TechCrunch ran the headline, "The Billion-Dollar Blunder, How Nepotism Sank a Virginia Tech Giant." They didn't name me explicitly in the negative press, which was nice. I was just the senior architect. Tiffany, however, was named. There were pictures of her Synergy presentation. Someone leaked the slide with the crayon font. It became a meme within hours. Synergy 2.0 became shorthand for "I have no idea what I'm doing." My old company's stock dipped 12% by Thursday. The investors who walked out, Henderson's firm, publicly announced they were reevaluating their portfolio in the sector. That's corporate speak for we wouldn't touch that company with a 10-foot pole wrapped in hazmat tape. Meanwhile, at Apex Systems, my welcome was warmer. I walked into the Apex headquarters on Friday. It was everything my old office wasn't. Quiet, focused, the engineers looked well-rested. The CEO of Apex, a woman named Alina who had actually written code in the 90s, met me in the lobby. "Linda," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "Welcome aboard, and thank you for the gift. The infrastructure is solid," I said. "It just needs a new home." "Oh, I don't mean the code," Alina smiled. "I mean the market share. We've picked up 3 of your old firm's biggest clients since Tuesday. They called us screaming, said their systems were down and they couldn't get a straight answer from anyone over there. They asked if we had a solution." "And what did you tell them?" "We told them we just hired the woman who built the solution," Alina said. "They signed 5-year contracts immediately." We walked to my new office. It had a window. Real view, not just a view of the adjacent parking garage. "By the way," Alina said, handing me a tablet. "Legal wanted you to see this, just to put your mind at ease." It was a letter from my old firm's lawyers, a cease and desist. "Don't worry," Alina said, seeing my expression. "Look at the reply our general counsel sent." I scrolled down. The reply was one sentence. "Dear Sterling, please refer to the attached timestamped resignation and IP Addendum B. If you proceed with litigation, we will be forced to subpoena the internal communications regarding the qualifications of the transformation director. Govern yourselves accordingly." "They dropped it," Alina said. "Withdrawn as of this morning." I sat in my new chair. It was comfortable. "The system they have," I asked. "The old one, is it truly dead?" "They're trying to rebuild it from the backups," Alina said. "But without the architectural key, the data is unstructured. It's like trying to assemble a puzzle in the dark and all the pieces are blank. They'll be operational again in maybe 6 months. But by then, we'll have the market. 6 months. In tech, 6 months is a geologic era. They brought it on themselves," Alina said, leaning against the doorframe. "You don't fire the pilot in midair because you want your niece to fly the plane." "No," I agreed, "you don't." I turned on my new computer. It booted up instantly. No red screens. No locks, just a clean, open terminal waiting for commands. I cracked my knuckles. "Ready to work?" Alina asked. "I've been ready for 3 days," I said. "Let's build something they can't steal." 2 weeks later, the dust hadn't settled. It had turned into mud. I was at the grocery store buying organic kale because I could afford it now without wincing when I ran into Marcus, my old lead engineer. He looked better. He wasn't wearing a tie. "Linda," he said, almost dropping his basket. "Jesus, I feel like I'm seeing a ghost." "Hello, Marcus, how is the transition going?" He laughed. "I quit on Monday. Apex made me an offer. I start next week. Did you know about that?" "I might have mentioned your name to Alina," I admitted. "I need a lead engineer who knows how to handle a crisis." "Thank you," he said earnestly. "Seriously. It's like a morgue over there, Linda. Richard is walking around like a zombie. The board is talking about a vote of no confidence." "And Tiffany?" I asked. I couldn't help myself. "Oh, that's the best part," Marcus grinned. "She's not just fired. She's socially radioactive. You know the charity gala next month, the one she's been planning all year? The board removed her as chair. Said it was bad optics to have her representing the company." Ouch. "And her husband, the CEO's son, he moved into a hotel. Rumor is he's furious she cost him his inheritance." It was petty, I know. But hearing that gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling. It wasn't just business anymore, it was karma. "They tried to unlock the servers with a brute force attack last week," Marcus whispered, leaning in over the kale. "Gavin's idea. It triggered the final failsafe." "The data wipe?" I asked. "Yep. All the historical logs. Gone. Poof. They're running the entire billing department off paper receipts from 2019. Marcus shook his head. "They keep asking if anyone knows your password. Richard actually asked me if I thought you'd used your dog's name." "I don't have a dog," I said. "I know, I told him that." He looked like he was going to cry. When I got home, there was one final voicemail on my blocked list. It had slipped through because it came from a number I didn't recognize. a prepaid burner phone. Maybe it was Tiffany, her voice was slurred. Wine, definitely wine. Linda, it's Tiffany. Look, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but you have to help me. Richard cut me off. Todd is threatening divorce. Everyone is laughing at me, Linda. They're making memes. Me, a meme. Just give me the code, please. I'll tell them I found it. I'll tell them I hacked it. Just let me have this win, please. I'm begging you. The message ended with a sob. I stared at the phone. Younger version of me might have felt pity. A younger version of me might have thought she's learned her lesson. But I wasn't young. I was 45. I was tired, and I remembered the balloons. I remembered the overflow cubicle near the bathrooms. I remembered the arrogance of a woman who thought my expertise was an accessory she could just try on. I didn't delete the message. I saved it. I saved it right next to the timestamped resignation letter. Evidence, just in case. And I blocked the number. There are no codes for undoing stupidity. There is no patch for arrogance. You have to crash and you have to burn. The final scene of this tragedy played out in a room I wasn't even in. It was 6 p.m. on a Friday. Richard sat in his office. My old office was visible through the glass partition. It was dark. The desk was empty. The chair, my ergonomic chair that I had fought for 3 years to get budget approval for, was pushed in neatly. I know this because Marcus told me. He had gone back to pick up his personal effects. He said Richard was just sitting there, staring at my empty desk. On his own desk was the quarterly report. It was a disaster. Revenue down 40%. Client retention down 60%. Legal fees up 300%. The Atlas project was dead. They had officially scrapped it that morning. They were going to buy a generic, off-the-shelf software solution from Oracle. It would cost them 10 times as much and do half the work. It was a defeat so total it was almost elegant. Richard looked up as Marcus walked past. She planned it, Richard said, his voice hollow. She planned it all. No, sir, Marcus said, pausing at the door with his box of belongings. She didn't plan to destroy you. She planned to survive you. You just happened to be standing in the way. Richard didn't answer. Just looked back at the empty chair. As for me, I was sitting on my patio. The sun was setting over Virginia, turning the sky a bruised purple. I had a glass of expensive Cabernet in one hand. On the table, my iPad was propped up. I wasn't looking at code. I wasn't looking at architectural diagrams. I was watching a compilation of Danny DeVito eating hard-boiled eggs on Always Sunny. I don't know why, it just made me laugh. It was absurd. It was chaotic. It was the exact opposite of the structured, rigid world I lived in. I took a sip of wine. 3 years they called me quiet. 3 years they called me reliable, which is corporate speak for taken for granted. They thought because I didn't shout, I didn't bite. They thought because I was a middle-aged woman in a cardigan, I was part of the furniture. They forgot that the architect knows where the load-bearing walls are. They forgot that the person who builds the house knows exactly how to bring it down. I tapped the screen. Danny DeVito offered someone an egg in this trying time. I smiled. No thanks, Danny, I whispered. I'm full. My phone buzzed. A notification from Apex. A new project invite. Project Titan, lead architect L. Connors. I picked up the phone. I accepted the invite. I drank my wine. We're all healed. Funny how the people who contribute the least always feel entitled to the most. They thought Linda would just walk away quietly, but some systems aren't built to be stolen. You can't strip years of work from someone and expect no consequences, especially when you never understood how the machine runs. The daughter-in-law wanted a title. Linda built the foundation, and when it all collapsed, she didn't even have to raise her voice. Thanks for watching. Folks, see you in the next one.